I'm Leander Peterka. I went into service in March of 1943. I was discharged from service in 1945 in September. Served overseas for about 22 months. I was an armor and tail gunner on a B-17, flying missions over in Europe. We were stationed at Steperone, Italy. And after that, I got a lot of pictures and all that over in Italy, and of course they took me off flying status in July, and I ended up where I my crew got shot down that day. I didn't fly that day, but the crew got shot down. I and the co-pilot and the bombardier, he was recovering from injuries before. We didn't fly that day. And they were the tail gunner, both waist gunners, radioman, and the new co-pilot got killed, where the top turret gunner got out and the pilot got out. Bombardier was blowed out the front hatch of the nose of the aircraft, and then the navigator, they pushed him out, and the ball turret gunner got up. He got out, he landed pretty close to where the navigator was. The navigator is still listed as MIA. We don't know what happened to him.
Did the crew get back to the lines then?
No, they were taken prisoner of war.
Who took the pilots from the planes prisoners? Who took them prisoners? The Italian soldiers?
No. They were flying, they flew on men in Germany. Okay. And that's where they got shot down.
Okay.
And but the ball turret gunner landed, I guess, from what I heard afterward, right close to where the navigator was, and he tried to give him a shot. He hit him in the head with the butt of his gun, and then he said, "Well, you do it." No, you do it. But then we have a reunion every year too, also. So then I talked with the Rossock was his name, bombardier. He ended up where he said he got back to the States. He was taken a prisoner of war and everything. He said he had terrific care. But then I had Solomon. He was a ball turret gunner. He lived in California, and the top turret gunner stopped by here, visit me, and he explained all what happened on that particular mission. And after that was after they got shot down and everything, I had to go down and see a full colonel, talk with him. A couple of times I had to talk to him. And after I got back from rest camp, after that, about the third time I talked with him, he just told me, "Sergeant, as of now, you are through combat flying. You will not fly any more combat." And that was it. So.
Did you say why?
No, they did. Evidently something in the medical records or something like that. So he didn't. I never did know reason why. I lost a lot of weight. I weighed about 125 pounds only then, and I guess it was probably just war worry or something. I don't know what it was, but anyway, they ended up and they put me in. I thought they was going to ship me home, but no, that wasn't the angle. They ended up where they put me into the tech supply section, and of course, with the rank of sergeant, outranked all of them in staff sergeant. It was staff sergeant. Outranked all of them in the tech supply and also personal equipment. So I hung around. Well, most of the time I was traveling over to Italy. I wasn't really assigned to them, so I went up through Rome, Naples, and all over the country there, and seen all of Italy. And then afterwards they stripped me. I was assigned, and when the war was over in Europe, I ended up where they had taken our aircraft, and they took everybody out of the group, out of our squadron. With that, they come out with a point system, and they took everybody out of it that had under 100 points, put them in the 99th bomb group. But they kept everybody in there that had over 100 points. and they were supposed to repatriate it back to the States. Well, I had 117 points, I think, when they counted my points. They used to had to have 85 in order to get qualified. So ended up where I stayed there, and they stripped down our airplane, put seats in them, and then we'd fly up into northern France and different places, pick up the artillery and our infantry personnel, fly them down to Africa, and so they catch a bigger plane and go back to the States. So I ended up as being a level loader, where big guy would be on the front. I'd load him up close to the wing section, and the little guys, I'd put them back by the door. And I did that, and afterwards they disqualified. I mean, they just disbanded that. Ended up where I and they called me out. Could go to Mussolini's racetrack. So
Mussolini's racetrack?
Yeah, his private maze track, the horse racetrack. Anyway, we stayed there a few days. I stayed there, and then they called my name out, have your luggage out, everything else. I was put on a Liberty boat, and I came home my boat. And I was 28 days out at sea.
Oh, jeez. Now, when you came home, was the war over in Europe?
Well, yeah, it was pretty all over. Matter of fact, I think it was all over in the East, too.
Okay.
So I didn't get discharged until September 29th of 1945.
How'd you end up being a rear gunner in a B-17?
Well, I went to basic training to Miami Beach, Florida. I lived in a hotel. Oh. And I had 18 days of basic training. And
that's it?
And after all that, they had all my service scores there and all that. And I could have qualified for pilot training, but I didn't know. I was a farm boy. I probably saw a couple of airplanes flying over the farm. I didn't know how I was going to like this flying. So I ended up where they sent me to Lowry Field. I had my choice of either going to armament training or AM training, aircraft mechanic. And they ended up where I went to I chose armament. I didn't want to be greasy all the time. So I got through my armament training, and after going through their school there and all that, qualified on the 30 and 50 caliber machine gun and the 20 millimeter cannons, all the bombs and the bomb sight. I was to operate both the Norden and the Sperry bomb sites. I got all that, and then was versed and trained on the bomb loading racks and everything in an aircraft and all that. Then after that, finished that, then I went to Las Vegas, Nevada for flight and gunnery. And that's how come I got into gunnery training. And I qualified in the top 10% of the class, so I got a choice to go 6-hour pass to town. So they ended up where after that we got that, and then I was a PFC right out of basic training. And then they made me a buck sergeant then. Then they shipped me up to Ogden, Utah, and they put us on crews, and they were forming this 483rd Bomb Group, and they ended up where they put me. I was put on crew with 509, and that was pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, and top turret engineer, and the radioman, and we were. After we started training on that, we was made staff sergeants. And we had each assistants. And of course I knew all the armament or the stuff on a B-17 and the bomb bays and everything else. They wanted to put me first on a B-26, and I said, no way.
Why is that?
Because that was a flying cigar, and I didn't like it, because they would fly along and they'd just pull up the wheels to see if it'd fly. And I didn't like that. It was a low altitude. I wanted to get on B-25s, but they said no. They wanted to put me on 24. I said no, I'd rather not be on that. That was a big old boxcar thing. It was a 4-engine bomber.
How many flights did you go on then?
I don't know. But the crew went down in their 36th, so I assumed.
No, how many times did you have to go on a mission?
That's what I say.
Oh,
I don't know.
okay.
I've got the air medal with clusters on it. Got the 2 air medals with clusters on it, and got all that. And all. I participated in 9 over their campaigns. I got the Silver Star and 4 Bronze Stars on that, on the campaign ribbon. And I got a whole bunch of ribbons and everything.
Was your plane ever fired on then?
Oh yeah. To begin with, when we first got over there, I flew my first missions in March, or no, first part of April. And of course they was testing us. We was a whole group that went over as a complete unit. And so they had us bomb a cement factory over in Yugoslavia. So we went over to flew that. It was a little ack-ack fire from the 88s down below. That wasn't much. They must have only had 2 or 3 guns there because we didn't get too much of that. Come back and I said, well, that isn't too bad. And of course they'd ordnance people come around to see if your aircraft was hurt, bombed, or anything like that by aircraft fire or shrapnel. And I said, no. I said, all right. Then they looked up on the rudder and the vertical stabilizer. There was a hole about that big around. And that was about 2 inches above my head. So that's when I first found out that flak was be respected. But then after we started flying missions, everyone we'd be hit by. So sometimes we're not too heavy about fighters that was able, but our main enemy was the 88s and the 105s on the ground, shooting up artillery shells and flak. And if they'd get our altitude and everything, then we'd throw out this chaff, and then it would disturb their radar. So then they'd put up just a barrage we'd have to fly through. And we flew through them. I never was wounded, but our bombardier, he was the only one that was hit at the time. And we lost the first airplane. That was, they took our new airplanes and swapped them with the 99s. We had their old junkers. And that one there, we flew some missions in it, but then this car would give us another new one. And we flew that, and that we come off from a mission, and I think it was Ploesti. And we got a direct hit in the right wing in the oil cooler. Right, made a hole in it, so they couldn't flare the props on or anything like that. So they feathered them. So they ended up where they had windmill there and caught fire, and so and the number 3 engine was acting up. So we had to take and salvo everything out of the aircraft. I went up and took the hammer, knocked the ball turret lugs off, and I ended up where we salvoed and dumped the ball turret. We dismantled all the machine guns and everything, tore them all apart, threw the ammo out and everything else, and including the bomb sight. I went up and took a hammer to the bomb sight, busted that up, and we threw that all out. But the tail gunner, then I had to fire out. I went back to the tail position, and then fire out didn't destroy our guns. We fired out all the ammo, and we had 265 rounds for each gun on each side. So I fired most of that out, and then the gun was starting to act up, so I pulled it all apart and threw it all out. So there was about 13 50 caliber machine guns laying out, spread out along somewhere up in there, up close to oil fields, along Prod or something. So after that, well, we made it back, but when we landed on the runway, the prop housing fell off on the runway on number 4 engine. But otherwise, number 3, we got that back in. But of course, the only thing we kept on was our parachute, and then we kept our pair of shoes, the Army shoes, tied to our parachute harness. And if we had to bail out, so we'd have shoes to walk in, because we had all this, while they were electrically heated flying suits, and they were gabardine, they were real nice suits. We had electric heated goggles and gloves and gun warmers, and everything was all electrically heated. And of course we was on oxygen at 25,000 feet in the air, so and after that, well, we made it back, and after that, well, then, like I say, they sent me to rest camp. And
No, you were flying.
They sent all of them. The crew was supposed to go back to rest camp then, after we made that. But the rest of the crew, they says no, they wanted to complete their missions. We were supposed to fly to start with 25, and they encouraged that to 35, and then they ended up putting on that we'd had to fly 50 missions before we'd be rotated.
Where were you flying out of? Italy, on a base in Italy?
Yeah, Stepperone, Italy.
Okay.
It's close to Foggia, our base was. And flying all of our missions there. And of course, then after that, then I just didn't hang around much. But anything, I went up to Italy and Venice and all over through Naples and Rome. Went and had mass with the Pope and all that. Another fellow, he was a ground mechanic. He was a Catholic also. Kirk Benson was his name. He was from Tennessee, I think it was, or something. Anyway, but he had to go back to base. I didn't. I just wandered around.
There was no problem walking around Italy at that time?
Oh no. Every once in a while they'd have to, like on communistic holiday, the first of May was the Communist Day. Then they had us, we was issued 45s. We'd have two of us that go in Paris, go around these towns making sure that they didn't get an uprising there. But otherwise, no, we didn't have any trouble going in.
That was part of your job, to go around to these small
yeah,
towns?
Yeah, they assigned just once in a while, just was on May 1st on the holiday. And they ended up where we went in, I went with Kirk Benson and I went. But I was issued, two air crewmen, another fellow from another crew. He and I walked around part of Foggia, Italy. And after the day was over, they picked us up and that was it. So we didn't have to. But we had something scary. We had sabotage on our aircraft one time. Come out to the plane, found all the guns were filled with grease. Well, I mean, if you filled a gun with grease at 25,000 feet, they wouldn't shoot. So the pilot was going to take them, say we couldn't fly that mission. Well, we decided, the crew, they said, well, we weren't hit by too many fighters that heavy or anything, so it was getting towards the end. And there was days, I never fired the gun. Went towards the end of the war.
Now the gun was 50 caliber?
Yeah, 50 caliber, 250s.
How many tracers would you have in there?
Well, they had, every fifth round was different.
Okay.
One was a tracer, but they took the tracers out and put in steel jacketed. They had a ball, armor piercing, and they took the tracers out, and because when they fired the tracers, the planes coming in could see where the hell they're coming from. So they'd house in on that. So they took all our tracers out. When you fire the guns, we never oiled or greased the guns at all. We fired them dry.
Why? Because it's too cold?
Yeah, high altitude they'd freeze up. It was probably 30, 35, 40 below. They'd freeze up, and so we'd fire them dry, and if we ruined the gun, well, they'd put in a new gun. That was all. But yeah, that was pretty good. I mean, I didn't mind. We was trained on this 300-mile sight. This round one with the rads in it, and as far as the tail guns, the waist gunner, the radioman, navigator, and bombardier had these flex guns like I did. The others were the
What's a flex gun?
That's one that's, just on a post.
Okay.
They ended up where they had the ball turret gunner, of course, had his 50 right on ball turret. He had a radio optic sight automatic, so that the same with the top turret. And then later on the last B-17 that it was on, that we got, after we wrecked this one, they give us a new shiny one. And that was by the name of Bunky. And that's the one they got shot down in. I've got pictures of that. I mean, we're standing in front of the aircraft. And it was quite an experience. I mean,
I can't even imagine.
yeah, they ended up where they ended up. Well, then of course when I got home, and I saved all the pictures and all that. This is all my history of that. And I got all the medals in there. And our original engineer, we were flying over, there was another crew down for, we landed in Trinidad. We went the southern route, and they ended up where they run aircraft into a 6-foot ditch or something, and broke a prop housing on it, so he stayed behind. He was a mechanic, aircraft mechanic. He stayed behind and put on a new, so they put on, so he didn't get to our back until about 15 days after we had been already over there. So, but then he flew, he could put his stuff in the tent. We lived in tents overseas there. And he was scheduled to fly next day with a crew next to us, 511. And so he was up around the Swiss border. And I was sitting there looking out, and all of a sudden that plane pulled out of formation. I couldn't see anything wrong with it, but all of a sudden the parachute started to come out. And the rest of the crew, that crew got turned into Switzerland. And he was interned. But he stopped and looked back to see if everybody was out of the plane. And then he bailed out, but he was taken prisoner of war. He didn't get interned in Switzerland. He landed in, I don't know how, if you landed in Switzerland or how it was that you, and he landed evidently outside Switzerland, so he was taken prisoner of war.
What happened to the airplane? Why did they bail out?
I don't know. The crew didn't, they come back after the war was over there in Europe. They come back, the rest of the crew, I talked with them, they come back to the base. But I asked them what happened. They said, well, no, that something happened with the engines and it was going around. So he had a pilot, a fellow by the name of Lieutenant Landholt, I think, had orders to bail out, so they bailed out. And I don't know what the reason was. I mean, so they ended up, that was quite an experience. I mean, watching them bail out, I mean, of course we saw several of them where they were shot down and have to bail out. Some of them never got out. I mean, but the rest of my crew that were killed, they're buried over in Turkey.
The crew bailed out and they were shot on the way down in their parachutes?
No, the ones that were killed in the airplane, in flight.
Oh, in flight.
They went down with the plane.
Oh, okay, okay.
But the ones that got out, they were, of course, taken prisoner of war. I mean,
okay.
there was up in...
Why were they buried in Turkey?
I don't know if it's a national cemetery over there or not,
Okay.
but that's what I've been told, and that they're buried over there. And but like I say, the navigator, I talked with his parents. He was from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Hell of a good-looking guy. Ended up where they found it. He's still listed in our 43rd Bomb Group Association as MIA. So I don't know if he was discarded or shot. I don't know what happened to him. And like I said, Solomon, he was the only one landed close to him. So, and talked with him, and he said, well, they took him away. Of course, he was an officer, so he went separate from the enlisted people. So, and of course, Solomon was, I think he was a buck sergeant. He was an assistant. Top third gunner was staff, same as I was. Raderman was killed, and he went down with the plane, along with the co-pilot, both waist gunners, and the tail gunner. They went down with the plane, and from what I understand, they were buried.
What was the mission they went down on? Where were they going?
Bemidji, Germany.
Pardon?
Bemidji, Germany.
To bomb. What were they going to bomb? Do you
They
know?
were bombing an airfield that had underground. They was making jet aircraft there and everything, and I guess that's what they said. It was supposed to be a fairly easy run, but the weather was kind of bad, and our group was the only group that got through first. And according to the statistics, they got hit by some 265 fighters plus about 300 ground guns, and they shot down one plane out of my squadron, but the 816th was the squadron behind us, and they shot all 7 aircraft down there. The 840th or the 817th was behind them, and they got 5 of them, and the 840th they shot down 14 of the 28 airplanes that flew that day. And I don't know what happened to all the people. I mean,
Yeah.
but the fellow, I guess, from the pilot course, they interviewed him, but they said that flew my position, shot down 2 fighters. That he got credit for 2 fighters and possibly 4 probables. So I don't know what the rest of the crew, what they did, because the waist gunner, both waist gunners, and that fired, I'm sure, was shooting away too. So, but outside of that, that's about all I could find out about it. I wrote to the parents and the wives of the fellows, and all they got listed that they was prisoner of war, and then afterwards they was listed as killed in action. And so that she went through there. That's all I can tell you about that.
Okay.
And they called us the Flying Red Devils. That's the aerial gunnery. That was our invasion, but that's the kind of currency we used during the war. In that was
In Italy.
yeah, 100 lira. In other words, that was the same as $1.